Well, I'll begin reading the bio. So our today's speaker is Dr. Esther Ajayi-Lowo from Texas Christian University, and her topic is on African Indigenous midwives, remembering, reclaiming, and resisting through birthwork. So Esther O. Ajayi-Lowo is an assistant professor of women and gender studies at Texas Christian University, TCU. Her passion as a scholar, activist, teacher lies in the intersection of gender, race, healthcare, and social justice. Dr. Ajayi-Lowo is a trained full-spectrum doula, and her current research interests include Indigenous birthing epistemologies, African feminisms, transnational feminism, Black maternal health, and global reproductive justice. Her latest article, Safe Motherhood Initiative, with the African Indigenous Birthing Knowledge, was published on Meridias in 2024. She is working on her book manuscript, Decolonizing Childbirth, Mothers, Midwives, and Modernity in Southwest Nigeria, which is an ethnographic exploration of the contemporary African Indigenous birthing epistemologies and approaches. Thank you so much, Dr. Esther, for joining us. The floor is yours. I, I think you're unmuted.
Apologies, that still happens in 2025. Warm greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy and delighted to be here and to have an opportunity to share my work about the African Indigenous midwives, since we really have to sort of translate their name into English language, and that'll be something that I will be talking about today. So, this is a part of my broader project, book project, where I'm doing an ethnographic research on African Indigenous midwives, focusing on Southwest Nigeria, in particular the Yoruba, right? And so my project covers just observing the midwives, speaking with them, but also speaking with the birthers, the pregnant women who use all their services. But today I'm focusing on the Indigenous midwives themselves and just like thinking about how critical their work is to our decolonizing project. When we think about African studies more broadly, women's studies, but also thinking about maternal health and reproductive justice. And so today, calling them African Indigenous midwives, but I also would like to introduce everyone to their Yoruba name. They're called the Agbebi. And so in this, my presentation, you would hear me say Agbebi, Indigenous midwives, and then I would explain why I'm making the choice to call them Indigenous midwives, because there are other research scholars who would call them traditional birth attendants, even in global maternal health discourse and rhetoric. Some or a lot of people know them as traditional birth attendants, but I'm making the specific decision to call them African Indigenous midwives because it matters, because this is how I see their work, and this is how they describe their work. And this is how this work that they do fits into the overall decolonizing project. So I'm starting this project with just the historical premise of how pre-colonial we had them as the main people attending everyone's childbirths in the homes, within the community, within the family. And then during colonization, there was a shift, right? I call it disruption. So there was that disruption that interrupted how they used to do their work, and that's still an ongoing thing even in this post-colonial era. So I think this picture actually, like, depicts that change. I would have loved to see Baba Agbebi, which translates into like a man, male midwife, also as part of the picture, just to show that for us, this work, birth work, wasn't originally gendered the way it was seen today. So just a general overview of my research methodology. So it is theoretically grounded in decoloniality. Think about decolonial studies, and it is in that way also epistemological, thinking about all the ways of knowing and birthing that have been eroded, continue to be eroded in this post-colonial era. So I'm using decolonial feminist studies, Maria Lagoon as one of that, African decolonial studies, one of those is, and I'm just giving, a few names. So there are a lot of researcher scholars that I draw from. So Ndlovu Gasheni also has powerful overview of what decoloniality itself means, right? And I'm also grounding my work in the work of Professor Yerunke Oyewumi, thinking about gender, how gender plays a role, because I'm also using an intersectional lens in all this conversation. And I should also add, other book, which is What is the Gender of Motherhood, which is a 2016 publication, which also helps me to think about motherhood, not just the birthwork, and how ungendered all of the conversation around birthing was for us prehistorically. And I also rely on intersectional and transnational feminist scholars in thinking about how, even though this is a particular case study on Africa, the Yoruba birthing epistemologies, there's a larger conversation, right, with Black and Brown birthing people wherever they are, in the world. Geographies wouldn't really matter. And then also to think about how we're all like impacted. So this is something that's beyond Nigeria. It is also like a larger African project, but also connecting to people of African descent and then African diaspora. So I'm also relying on reproductive justice and transnational feminism to make those larger connections. And then I draw a lot from a lot of disciplinary. So this work is very interdisciplinary. I draw a lot from disciplinary perspectives. And so my ethnographic exploration includes being there in person, digital exploration when I'm not able to be there, but also just like being there to like observe them and just be there as they do their thing, watch as they, deliver the baby, speak with the women, just be around them. So they're also conducted interviews as well. Okay. And I'm focusing on three southwest cities in Nigeria, just Lagos, Ibadan, and Abeokuta. And it's really great to shed more light about these cities. So these are not remote places where women would not have access to hospitals. So they have relatively better access to hospitals. And I'm using the word relative intentionally because there's also a larger conversation there. But then I think it suffices to let us know that these are not people in remote places where they cannot, access or they cannot, afford to go to the hospital. So I think I'm just going to also move ahead from here. This is just like an overview. It is a work grounded in women and gender studies, but it's very interdisciplinary. Part of this is also thinking about my positionality, how I come into this research as someone who also have birthing experiences, who is also a trained doula here in the US, and how also I bring in myself. So I share part of my autoethnography in this work. And I usually also like start with that, thinking about how I was just one of the people who thought, well, African Agbebis, indigenous midwives. When I was pregnant in 2007, I thought, well, this is 2007. And I'm, so educated, been to the United Nations University. I'm focusing on maternal health, women's rights on the floor. I'm advocating for everyone to go to the hospital, for us to have access, lobbying the government to pass all the policies that will make maternal health care affordable and all of that. So this project starts with me taking a step back, backing up to actually decolonize my own thoughts, my own thinking process about our own birthing system, our own birthing framework. And this was when I encountered the medical setting and saw all that could be better. And then it made me remember that I had a mom who had 9 biological children of her own, my mother-in-law, 7 biological children of her own, my sisters-in-law. And then I thought about me the very educated person who decided to say, hey, no, I want to cut off of all of that, and then ended up, losing my child. I will not go into too much detail, but I just would like you to know that my journey into this work, right, started with me decolonizing my own thought and my own mind and rethinking and remembering and then sort of reclaiming, not just with this research, but just my total outlook into reclaiming our ways of knowing. And in this research, I'm thinking about birthing in particular. So thinking about how this, we think about the reason this work is so important, right? And I'm not putting all the data and statistics there, but I would just like share broadly that when you think about Black maternal mortality, Nigeria has the highest maternal deaths globally, right? And that is really huge. The Africa as a continent has the worst in comparison with other regions was maternal deaths. And then wherever you find Black and brown birthing people all over the world, Brazil, Cuba, Ghana, Nigeria, and then think about the diaspora in the US, where we know that Black birthing people are at risk of dying during pregnancy and childbirth 3 to 4 times higher than their white counterparts. So this is a larger African conversation about Black birthing and Black maternal death. And I see this work as one way that we can think about. And I'm saying one way, not the only way, but one way that we have neglected and marginalized so much that we need to rethink and reclaim in order for us to have a holistic approach to resolving Black and maternal deaths on the continent. And then it is also thinking about birth and reproduction more generally in Africa. It is a work that helps us think about several colonial assumptions. I'll mention some of them in the course of my presentation. And then it's been so analyzed, and I'm trying to like shed the light and invite conversation, invite us to rethink and remember today, and also use the lens of the work of the Agbebi to understand all the things that we need to reclaim and remember. Right. This work also is critiquing the normalized terminology. And then I started with thinking about the terminology traditional birth attendants. So when I think about that word, I think about a lot of ways that there's been pushback about you shouldn't call them African Indigenous midwives. They are traditional birth attendants. The reason that it's important to see them as midwife, not because it captures the name, the in particular name that they bear, but it's because it gives them like that parity with other midwives, with other quote unquote skilled midwives who are able to deliver childbirth safely. But when we think about the WHO definition of a traditional birth attendant, it only talks about people who have been helping others to deliver babies, either through apprenticeship or just through learning. But the important thing that is missing in that is the connection to African Indigenous worldview. So the epistemological aspect of it, the fact that this work relies on intergenerational knowledge, bodies of knowledge and experience that is being passed down from generation to generation. And so you thinking about Indigenous midwifery captures the essence of that work beyond the way that they are being seen as traditional birth attendants. And one would also understand how, that TBA, traditional birth attendant, doesn't capture the essence of the work of the Agbebis. When I did this presentation, actually, I talked about the birthing person. I focused on them in my presentation on the Lagos Studies Conference this summer, and there was a lot of pushback about the terminology. We had OBGYN, we have a Western medical midwife, and we had people who were like, well, you shouldn't call them that name. They are TBAs, they are traditional birth attendants. That also tells me that that name also pushes them below the rung in the hierarchy of people who have any skills or training to deliver childbirth. So that terminology also matters, and it matters epistemologically. And in addition, of course, it matters for us to be thinking about the practical benefits that comes with the work of the Agbebis. Now, let's think about some of the things that the Agbebis are inviting us to remember. One of the things that they told me about is how these bodies of knowledge about birthing precedes the Western medical birthing, either on the continent in North America. For them, it is the way that we started having childbirth. And they would say, pretty much everywhere, we started like this. We started in the community, with the family. And the fact that they understand that is so powerful. And they would ask me, so when you speak with the doctors and all the, as they would call them, white collar doctors and white coat doctors, if they are older generation, if they are in their 50s or 60s, ask them if they were born at any hospital. Most likely they were born with an agbebi, they were born within the home. So they understand their place in the society as the people who have been delivering childbirth over the generation. They will talk about how the knowledge is being passed down. So they're calling us to remember that these bodies of work, this knowledge of African birthing precedes the newer one, right? And then not just precede, but also incorporates it. So they will say, hey, they said this is new, but we have been doing this over the years. And in my research also, I see the C-section in African, thinking about the history of Africa, thinking about how old that was found in Uganda, how they would use banana swine to, actually sew up after they cut the woman to get the baby out. So in life and death situation, they know what to do. One of the Agbebis shared with me how grandmother who knows how to set bones when it's a life and death situation and there's no other thing to do, knows how to shift pelvic bone, aid the child delivery, and reset it. She says, well, that takes a longer time to heal, but she connects that to thinking about C-section when it's life and death. So thinking about how African midwives have had their ways of thinking through even the so-called complex, complicated childbirth deliveries over the years. And they see how that connects with some of the newer things and how they have their own old ways of doing that. I'll talk more later about how they're also bringing in the new ways, which I think also put them in better space as they're combining the indigenous and some of the newer medical inventions. They're calling us to remember that Western medical was developed from African indigenous bread. They will talk about how medications are made from herbs and leaves and connect them with how they also do their own work, and that African indigenous birthing is holistic. So for them, this is not just a medical thing. They pay attention to the spiritual needs of birthing. They pay attention to how it needs to be communal, held within the community, with everyone supporting the father of the baby if is, available, the in-laws, the mother-in-laws being a critical part of that, and just like how social that is, and how it also helps the psychology of the birther to feel comfortable and to feel among their people. So again, one of the things they're calling us to remember is to think about the shifts that happen in the space, the place where we deliver. So they think about how the home within the family is the original space of delivery, and that makes it something really communal and familiar. So they think about how the shift also removes birthing away from its original space. So it's a space where even the birthers will confirm to me feels strange in a lot of ways. It could be in terms of language, it could be in terms of, how they're meeting, some nurses who are they're meeting for the first time, OBGYN who is like this is the first time they're seeing them, and how that also makes it so strange to when you're within the people, within the family, and you have all the support that you can get. So that's also to remember that, and to remember that it remains potent, and that is shown, is evidence in their work, and it's in evidence in the testimony of the women that I spoke with who used their services. And some of the things they're helping us to reclaim our existence, right? Our sustenance, our epistemology, because birthing epistemology is one aspect of the overall African epistemological framework that keeps being pushed down by modernity. And I'm putting modernity in code because how do we even define that if it does not incorporate the cultural, the traditional, and the way that we live? It helps us to reclaim our spirituality, right? And then our healing approach. They're connecting their works to the larger African traditional healing, the healing method that is spiritual, that is dependent on herbs. And they would also think about how the herbs is more natural and how the the medications now have been processed, entails chemicals and all that. So they understand the ways that their own birthing framework is natural, connected to nature, connected to leaves, and actually safer, right, in their view. They're helping us to rethink our community, what it means to be communal and support one another. Thinking about the concept of motherhood, fatherhood, family, and how all of this for us is all together, and how we used to live and how ungendered this has been. So I have a chapter to think about how there are men who are agbebis, women who are agbebis, and for the betters, it just does not matter. And how the agbebis also see themselves as, whether they are male or female, as part of the mothers of the children that they are helping women to birth. So in essence, they're helping us reclaim ourselves, our lives. And this has also helped me in the process of me rethinking and decolonizing my own mind and thought as well, helping us to do all of this. They're passing on this knowledge in aiding childbirth, helping birthers, resisting compulsory or over medicalization of childbirth, increasing birthing options, right? This is one way that some women want, and should be able to continue to have access to. And I think this is important because in some African countries, they do not have maybe permission to actually attend birth. In Malawi, they were banned for a few years and then recalled when they saw that the result wasn't palatable. In Nigeria, we do not have any cohesive policy on what we want to do with them. So in Ondo states, the Agbebiye program will just like pay them some money and then have them refer everybody back to the hospital. So that is more like monetizing, just like giving them money and then restricting their knowledge, right? And then in Lagos State, we say, oh, we just want to train you. It's not that the training itself is entirely bad because it has some benefits that will be described, but that training is coming up, is coming from a framework of you do not know what to do. We don't think you know anything. We need to train you. So that training itself also reinforces a colonial framework of disregarding the prior knowledge, bodies of knowledge of the Agbebis themselves. So that's like, part of the conversation that they're helping us to really rethink and open up the space, and also trust that they are not only helpful in some technical and when they have already been trained by the medical, that whether with or not without the medical training, they have their own bodies of knowledge that are helpful, that could also benefit the Western medical birthing practitioners and personnel. And then they remain a testament that our Indigenous birthwork framework actually works. Right, so I'll skip this because I have other slides that, break all of these down. So I'll start with thinking about the Imo-Ishe Agbebi. And for the Yorubas, I apologize because my Ami Orioro didn't translate when I converted my slides to PowerPoint. So I lost some things. But Imo-Ishe Agbebi, that I really am not sure how to capture that. It's more like technical know-how. So it's knowledge, know-how, it's knowing and then doing, right? Knowing and doing, like what they know and then what they do. So I think like a lot of scholars, the maternal health strategists, policy makers would maybe see, oh, well, we can train them. But I think like the epistemological aspect of their knowledge is being disregarded. So this is to shed more light into, they not only can obtain skills when they're trained in the Western medical modern method, but they do have knowledge. And then they help us like to debunk the colonial assumptions that they're too old, they do not have Western education, short trainings are not enough for them. All of these rhetorics, right, developing from some scholars, medical doctors, Western medical personnel, the WHO. There are a lot of ways that they're like, well, they're old, they don't have Western education, therefore they cannot deliver, children safely. It's risky to go to them. They do not sterilize it. There's a whole lot that I found in the course of just like observing how people talk about them, the very popular ones, right? But here I'm calling our attention to the evidence of the things that they discussed with me, that I saw them do, and that the women also confirmed. So part of that is just like having that skill for natural birth. successful vaginal births, including successful vaginal birth after C-section, which we call VBAC. And it was just like mind blowing to see women say, yes, I had a C-section at the hospital, right? But when I had the second one, my friend told me that, my midwife can do this. I consulted them, they reassured me, I trusted them, and then I had a vaginal delivery after C-section. So I'm like, okay, this is something that they know how to do and that is not out there as part of the knowledge that they possess. How to like maneuver the placenta for it to be well positioned to aid safe child delivery. They have the knowledge of just knowing the gestational period. And I have a quote that just like brings that to life. He said, well, 2 months, and this is what's said in Yoruba. So I have all the Yoruba, quotes which I think would really like bring it to life. And in my book, I'm also inserting the Yoruba anytime I use a quote to retain the authenticity of what they said, because a lot of things will get lost in translation. So it said 2 months pregnancy will feel like a small knotted edge of a cloth or wrapper, and she would describe it. And then we know the difference when it becomes 3 months, when it becomes 4 months. This helps them know how the fetus is developing, what the gestational period is, and for some birthers, they will say, when she told me I was this far gone, I did a scan and the scan also confirmed it. So again, they're able to use the modern method to actually prove that they have this knowledge that is so accurate. That also is something that I don't think is a common knowledge about the work of the Agbebi and the sort of things that they know how to do. They will talk about food and nutrition. They talk about the change and the shift in the things that we eat and how that impacts on the maternal and infant outcomes that we're dealing with, that is really getting, higher and higher. So they will say, we tell the pregnant people not to drink, eat canned food, soda. They said this is not part of the things to eat when you really want to have a safe delivery. So they have their own knowledge and understanding of the connection between food and nutrition, and they have specific types of food that they would also recommend. One of the one that I think is very common that I heard from almost everyone is ewedu. Ewedu is jute leaf in English language, and they will talk about how that is very important for because it's vegetable for its nutrition, but also the thing that it has connection to safe delivery, right? And so you see, childbirth without surgery is our tradition. This is what we know how to do. And they just do not wait till the day of delivery or during labor to think about this. This is something that they think from from the inception, from the time this woman, pregnant person comes to them to say, I'm pregnant, they start thinking of what they need to do for this child to be delivered vaginally, if possible. They do their best. And that's also one of the testimonies of the birthers that, oh, well, at the hospital, they would, at 7 months or 8 months is when they're telling you, you can't do this, you can't have this. Then they tell you your baby is breech and it's late and you have to do C-section. But they will say the Agbebis would pay attention from the beginning and would do everything in their power. Right. And then when they cannot do that, that's when they plan to refer. There's a lot of complications around referral, around how the woman usually gets turned back because, we say you've been drinking herbs. We don't know where you've been. We're not taking you in. There's a lot of conversation around that. Right. Especially in Lagos State that promises them to refer and will give them letters, will give them certification, but the women still end up being turned back to the Agbebi and not being attended to. So one of the things that I also found fascinating about their body of knowledge is how they're turning breech baby to the normal position, either manually or spiritually. So the manual one is for them to think about how to do the maneuvering, how to start with herbs, and also telling the woman to go and do scan and to confirm, I told you this is how this baby is. And then after they've done all the maneuvering, they say, okay, you can do scan if you want. And the scan would also confirm. And I have some pictures of some of the scan that they showed me. So they are also thinking about like, yeah, we know how to do this and we can show you. And they're showing it, and the women are also corroborating their story. So, but they also have the spiritual way of doing this. And I think one of the one that I found fascinating is the Agbelewu. Agbelewu I did not even attempt to translate that, but I'll just describe it. Agbelewo is one part of their process. It is spiritual, it is ritualistic, so it's not something that they could tell me everything that they use and what they do. But it's a process of saying, hey, okay, we see that the head circumference in proportion to the pelvic, is disproportionate. So the pelvic is smaller, the head circumference is bigger, and we need to do something. Now, let's think about the Agbelewo process. So they use it to really make the child become smaller, not smaller that it cannot survive as a fetus, but just like adequate size for it to come out. And then when the child comes out, and then in a few weeks or 1 or 2 weeks, you see the child is like chubby, beautiful, fine. Been seeing that in my community. I have been told that I'm okay, I'm not sure what they do, but to also have them explaining, and as part of their process leading on to vaginal child delivery, and how the women also know that they know how to do this and keep going to them. It's just like quite fascinating that there's this body of knowledge that is, that is technical, that is spiritual, that is so epistemological grounded in the ways that we think about birthing and healing approach in the Yoruba setting, but also thinking about African birthing epistemology in the process. So I thought this quote captures that. I'm not going to read it so I can skip to talk about some other things. They talk about a lot how their work just enhances the sense of community, right? And again, the Bertels confirm that. They say, one of the one that I really love is how compassionate they describe their work. So they call it Ishe Anuni. Ishe Anuni means it's a work of it's a compassionate work. See, this is one of the things I really struggle with. Like, how do I convey this in this language? And again, part of my strategy is using this Yoruba as part of the decolonizing process, because this research will be different if it was conducted in English language or had a translator or an interpreter. So part of that is also being familiar with the language, with the culture. I've been able to feel some of the things that they're discussing. So when they say, man, if I ask them, so how much do you get from these? Do you even make some money? They say, oh, well, Ishe Anunio, Ishe Anunio. And it kept like re-echoing, Ishe Anunio. It means that they are not after the money, essentially. This is a work of dedication to the community, a work of, just like supporting the community, helping others to birth and seeing themselves as part of that community itself. A few days ago, I just like woke up, and I usually start, after my morning rituals, I start my day with just listening to Arise News. That's one of the Nigerian news on YouTube as I'm getting ready to go out. And there was this news about a woman who was pregnant, who went to a hospital, and then they said, oh, you need 228,000 naira. That should be like maybe about less than $10. And this woman was turned back, you need this money. And then she was walking around, she doesn't have this money. And she's heavily pregnant. By the time someone found her on the road and took her to a private hospital, they discovered that she was already in labor. And then they had to refer her back to another hospital. In all of this process, by the time she got to the final hospital where they eventually attended to her, she was carrying twin pregnancy and they were both dead. This was just like, it just brought back all of the ways that the Agbebi would say, Ishe Anuni. This is one thing that the Agbebis would not do. We also have situations where in Nigeria where, when a woman gives birth and they are not able to pay, they get just like detained, literally detained in the hospital. Like, you cannot live with your baby until the money is paid, right? That's there's a lot of things to talk about that, but it just suffices to know that women usually face those kind of experiences when they're unable to pay. But that's not with their babies, because they would say, well, if they're able to pay, it's fine. But if they're not able to pay, I cannot hold them down. They're part of the people in my community anyways. And then they would say, if this one is not able to pay, I will see one, educated, someone, or I will see a customer from the US who will call me for herbs, and I will send it to them and they will pay me lots of money. So they say, well, if the money doesn't come from these people, it will come from some other people who are willing to pay more. So I just go with the flow. And it's just beautiful to see this sort of empathy that they bring into this work. For them, it's a work that is life saving. They're saving lives. They're helping their community. They are passionate about it. And it's just really beautiful. They also have a communal referral process. So they say, well, if I'm not able to do this, I know this Baba baby who can do that. Oh, I know that Iya baby who knows this other procedure. So they also have that communal referral amongst themselves because they know one another. And that also establishes that sense of community that they build. And this is part of the things that the women really love and that we should definitely be reclaiming. Right. And again, I think I mentioned that they see the children as their children, right? So think about communal motherhood as well, communal parenting. So they say, and then some of them will say, "Oh, did you see that woman? Oh, that woman, you can ask her. Our mom gave birth to her here, and now she's carrying her own baby." So they also have the joy of like seeing the children that have been given birth to in their care, also growing up within the community, and they know their stories, their birthing stories, and I think it's really beautiful. Right. And then to think about how, of course, I talked about how intergenerational and how on gender that is, but I wanted to just highlight that. So think about how when I asked the Baba baby, so you're a man, and then usually people will say some women don't like to be, attended to by a male birth worker, doula, midwife, and then they will say we don't see gender during childbirth. It's a life and death situation. And I would ask the women too who are with the men, they will say, no, they're just my baby. And then some of them will say, these ones are different from the ones at the hospital. I say, okay, tell me the difference. What's the difference? Now they will say, well, we know this Baba. This is the Baba that's been in this community. Well, those men, a lot of them are there in the hospital, they just like surround you and you feel somehow, right? So they would describe how, when we think about the male, takeover or hijack of midwifery, the birthers who go to Baba babies do not see it as that. So when they go into the Western medical space, they see gender because gender is so prominent there in the ways that things are approached. They feel inferior to the men. They feel there's a whole lot of ways that gender appears differently because it's a conception, it's something that is really big there. But when you talk about the Agbebi, it seems like, well, it's our Baba Agbebi, and that's just like really beautiful. And so like I have a different chapter really thinking through this, right? And then thinking through how these times, right, are also changing, and it's harder to get young men, right, to actually inherit this work from the Baba babies, especially if they're educated and then they're already thinking about what needs to be like a male work or thinking about the profitability of it. So there's a whole lot that I'm using the other chapter to do, but I think it suffices in this presentation to know that there are Baba babies and Iyag babies, and they've been like that from generation, from pre-colonial era until now, because that work wasn't gendered. It was something that they all did in common. And so like one woman would say, well, I inherited it from both my mom's side and my dad's side. And she is one of the people who were like, yeah, from both family, I inherited different skills about midwifery, and it was really beautiful. And to also see how in some of them you see the man, the husband and the wife doing it together with their children, right? So there's still that sense of building it as communal work that is not gendered in the ways that we think about male taking over women's work or women's birth work, right? And I just want to speak about the spirituality aspect of it because without this presentation is not complete. So while would explain some things to me and like, okay, this leaves and all that, there are some spiritual things about that they will tell me the name, explain a little bit, but it is deeply rooted in spirituality, in rituals. So things like the Iwe Ayobi is will give them that birth that makes child deliveries easy, right? Abiwere is similar. Aseje, part of some concoction that they would use, that's spiritual. This is just to highlight the fact that they use a lot of like herbs and leaves and a lot of things that aid child delivery. And then there are also some spiritual incantations that some of them would use. So not all of them. So some would say, I don't do incantations and all of that, but if they want that, I can refer them. But some of them are like, yeah, we do this also, and we believe in these spiritual powers, right, in aiding child delivery. And they will, also point you to birthers who can walk you through what they did. One of the birthers told me how the one Iyag baby helped her stop postpartum hemorrhage, and that was a powerful story. She literally had to sneak this woman in the midnight into our hospital space because she knew she was dying if that was not done. That had been done for her before, but this time she decided to go to the hospital, trusting that they also have, remedies for it. But she said she knew she was dying, and she had to arrange for the mama to come and do this ritual for her, and the blood stopped. And she said everyone was surprised the next day when all the blood was gone and she was up on her feet. So these are like some powerful stories and testimonies of the things that it's also rooted in some deep Yoruba belief and saying about childbirth. So this first one is bí ewé ṣe ń bọ́ lára igi tí kì í ní igi lára, bẹ́ẹ̀ ni ọjọ́ ìkúnlẹ̀ rẹ̀ yóò rè. Apologies that I didn't translate it, but I just wanted it to be there. It means that just as the leaves when it's dry, just like drops off the tree, easily, with no stress, seamlessly. This is how your birth would be. And these are the words that they say to the woman or to the pregnant person when they greet them, when they tell them. They are empowering words that also makes the woman comfortable and believe, and also connects our faith in traditional healing, in traditional prayers to our safe delivery. And then, bí o ṣe ń fi orúnkún ọ̀tún kúnlẹ̀ ló máa fi ti òsì dìde. That also, some of them connected that to the birthing position. So they will say, the birthing position that we're being taught now, that people do now usually is have people lay down. Like, no, birthing should be on your knees. Some of them will say birthing should be used cotton. But I think this saying also shows that, historically, we have always thought about birthing as maybe something that you do on your knee and not like laying back. And now the Western medical is catching up with that, and also seeing that how, laying, standing, squatting, kneeling are better positions that aid safe child delivery. So there's just a whole lot I would move. I want to talk about this time, this post-colonial era, and how they're navigating a lot of complexities. And I think this also like helps us to see how they also know that a lot of people think that while they are the ones killing the women, maternal mortality rate is high because of them. They are like, no, we are being lumped together with others who do not have this indigenous birthing experience. So they know that they are different from people who just are maybe auxiliary nurses, or people who just like come into this work. And but for them, this is a work that is intergenerational, and they would want everyone to understand that, and that is different from people who are just learning from others. But it is different when they inherit it and when they keep passing it down and rely on that indigenous intergenerational knowledge, right? Some of the things that some that have received Western medical training said we see the need for this and we do it, especially in Lagos and Ogun State, Abeokuta. It's slower in Ibadan because they're only having meetings and all that. Some of the Agbebis are trying to do this by themselves, but there's huge presence of training in Ogun State and Lagos State. And so some of them are incorporating like blood pressure. So you will see them have blood pressure curve. And then some of them will even like hire like an auxiliary nurse to take care of the blood pressure curve. There are some who also have lab scientists in-house that will check the blood and all of that, which is, I think, is really beautiful. When they combine that with the indigenous knowledge, I think it just like placed them in a better position to use these two bodies of knowledge to actually attain safe delivery for birth people. So they also like are willing to send women for HIV testing, and they refer them to the hospital. So while they are willing on their own part to accept some of these Western medical innovations or training, on the other hand, the Western medical healthcare providers, policymakers do not trust that the Agbebis have their own bodies of knowledge that they also need to imbibe and bring into the ways that they care for pregnant and birthing people. And I think that is important. So we need that reciprocal transfer of knowledge that is both end to be able to actually devote to improving maternal health and reducing maternal mortality. Right. And then some of the things that they're critical about is, I mentioned birthing position, then breastfeeding. Some of the women would say, now they say we should we should let the baby latch, but we believe in helping the baby latch. So there's this Lagos slogan of like, Gbomo foyon, that's how they're being trained. And then they were like, no, that's not correct. Gboyon fomo. It's just one of the things that they're a bit critical about. They're a bit critical about how they're taught to take care of the umbilical cord. They think it needs more heat. They think it needs and they will show evidence of it working better than the new things that they are being taught. So they're also not just taking everything that they are being taught. They are critical because we know this works. We know this has been working and keeps working better than what they're talking about. So we are not taking that. So it's really powerful how they're also not just subscribing to the training, but also continue to do the things that they know that actually work and have been working for them. Right. So just to round up that, this is not a move away from the Western medical. Like I said, the indigenous incorporates the medical because that's where it started from, right? So this work is not just saying, hey, we need to move back to what it used to be, but thinking about where we are and how we can make use of this, especially because whatever we've been doing and trying to push down the indigenous hasn't been working. Otherwise, we'll not be having the high maternal mortality rate that we're having. And for some who would argue that, well, in Nigeria, for instance, we don't have enough healthcare providers, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough midwives. We just need to get there. We need to have more hospitals, we need to have it funded, we need to make it available and affordable. And at that time, we will no longer need the babies. I also want to say that's not the way it's working now, right? While, while we think that, we should also think about, for instance, the US, where there's relative higher access to the Western medical birthing framework, and how we still have higher Black maternal deaths compared to the right. So it means that the system itself is standardized, relies on a standard curriculum that is not open to cultural complexities, to traditional knowledge, to the communal birthing knowledge, to the prehistorical and intergenerational knowledge, and the things that we know about birth. So when we think that, oh, well, we just need to medicalize, we have to think about the situations where they have that and it's not working. So we don't have to wait, because I think that's where we are in Nigeria, for instance. And the pushback is like, well, maybe when we have more hospitals, when we have more this. But my other project is actually now thinking back and going into the hospital spaces and also documenting better stories. And then we can put that side by side and see how that system needs to be reformed to be open up to our indigenous approach for it to actually work for us. These are just, pictures showing some of their workspaces, me with them having child delivery, them having meetings, prenatal care with songs that are grounded in our culture, in our worldviews. And yeah, the men also being part of this work. Some of them who've had certification, and then also some of the scan results when they're able to like turn breech babies, and then you see the name, you see the dates, and you see that they're actually getting this work done for real. So I just thought I would share some of that as well. And then that's some of my citation. And I would like to say Esheun Pupo, which is Yoruba language, means like thank you very much. I'm grateful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Esther. That was very fascinating and I would say captivating and emotional at the same time. Thank you so much. So, Professor Makoni, yeah, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much uh, for this informative and, to quote Messi, captivating presentation. I want to find a way into a conversation with you before I hand over to my colleagues here. Do the Abwedi call themselves Abwedi? How do they refer to themselves? Or is that a term that is used to describe them by non-Abwedis?
I think you are muted.
Okay. Apologize. Yes, so because they will refer to themselves in Yoruba language, they refer to themselves as Agbebi, Yagbebi, Baba Agbebi. I know that there's an Ondo State program that call them Agbebiye. Maybe just like to
Okay.
put emphasis that they're able to deliver safely. But the Agbebi is the Yoruba term. Some will call them Baba Agbomola, Iya Agbomola. So there, but Agbebi is the most common one, right? That
Okay.
they will refer to themselves as. But they also know that the government calls them traditional birth attendants. So the association, because it's also connected to the government's training, the government's regulation, they will say it's the Association of Traditional Birth Attendants. So they also know that the term that the English people or the government are calling them is traditional birth attendant, TBA, but they know themselves as Agbebi
Okay.
and call themselves that.
Okay. What about you were focusing on the Yoruba? What about the other ethnic or nation states? What do they call themselves? What do the Abwedis who are Yoruba, who are Igbo, for example, call themselves? Right.
Because I did this in the Southwest, the Yoruba, I'm not sure what exactly the Igbo language or Hausa language
What they would call themselves.
that what they will call them, right? But I know that most scholars just call them traditional birth attendants, which I'm moving away from because of
Sure.
what I really explained. So like call them what they're being called to actually put power on the sort of work that they do.
But are there any connections in terms of practices between the Yoruba Abwedis and, let's say, the Abwedis in other ethnic groups?
Yes, yes, yes. And some of the scholars that I'm, drawing from connecting with also did this similar research in the East with the Igbos. There's Ohaja. Ohaja is one scholar who is also working in the East, who is also always thinking about the Igbos and all that. So I've had some readings that are also thinking about the Igbos. They will think about them as traditional birth attendants, but when I read their work, I'm like, okay, this is similar to what the Agbebis are doing, right, in the South West part. So for the Igbos, I can say definitely, and I have books and articles on
Okay.
them. But for the Hausas, not quite. I haven't really found, and that's something that I should also look at so that we can think about how nationalized this is in Nigeria, for instance. And we know that Nigeria is so like multilingual, multi-ethnic, so there will be like tons of languages and all that.
Yes. Yeah.
I assume that there will be some Yoruba dialects that might have like a different name than the generalized Agbebi, right? So, yeah.
Okay. Let me just ask another question. Um, since the Yoruba are spread across the world,
Mm.
US, Brazil, etc., uh, are there any Yoruba who follow traditional birthing practices? Let's say, for example, in the United States, right?
Yes. Yes, and I love that you're asking me this question
Mm.
because like I said that I was trained in the US. So I
Uh-huh.
had my doula training with LT mothers, LT babies in Atlanta, Georgia. So there's a big community of doulas and Black midwives in Georgia, in Atlanta, who are reclaiming this African indigenous birthing epistemologies. And some of them who have traveled to Nigeria, who have traveled to Ghana, who have traveled to Tanzania, who have traveled to Kenya, who are also connecting their knowledge and reclaiming what they think is being part of what they knew. So the doula training relies extensively on some of those things that the Agbebis are doing. And a colleague of mine just finished a paper that we just sent to peer review, and we did oral history interviews with Black midwives in the US, doulas, and people who use their services, whether under the radar, under the table because of certification issues and all that.
Uh-huh.
But there is this larger body that is reclaiming this knowledge. And we're doing a second round of that. So, in addition to me focusing on Nigeria, I'm also working on that transnational connection. So, now we're writing another paper and thinking about these reclaiming of the indigenous birthing knowledge in the US. And we're speaking with more midwives, Black midwives who are reclaiming it and who are also traveling back and coming back. And also when they go, to think about how reciprocal that is, they are also telling the Agbebis, like, hey, this is how we need to understand what the medical system is doing and how to resist it more. So, which is also like interesting. So it's not a one-way thing, them going to take, but they are also working with the Agbebis to know that we're together in this, and this is what the medicalization of birthing is doing to Black people. So this is really an interesting research. So I love that you're asking me. And it is also interesting to know that the reclaiming of those African indigenous birthing knowledge is very strong in the US, right? I don't want to say stronger, but I say it's really strong. We spoke with some people who thought that it's stronger because here there's like, they're bonding together. It's an intentional resistance. Right. Whereas at home it's like, well, it's ours. It's our own. We do it this way. We know it. But in the US, it's like it's intentional. Like we really need this to save the Black community. So yes, there's that. Right. It's flowing beyond the shores and the geographies of Africa to wherever people of African descent are. Right. And the US in particular, which I do know about.
Okay. Now let me ask you the last question. Are there any formal or informal sessions in which either the Baba Abwedis or the female Abwedis teach the husbands or the male to understand issues about birthing? Are there sessions, for example, where they are trying to get the young men and everybody else to understand what really is involved in processes about birthing?
Yes, there are. Right. And I think it's really powerful that a lot of them are intentional in passing this on. Right.
Okay.
So they will speak about, some resistance with their children who might be male, young, and educated, especially because now they are thinking that, well, as a man, I need more of this and more of that. So it's getting increasingly difficult, especially when they have like, Western degrees and just want to do something. And that's also connected to the political economy in the country, right? But by and large, they are very intentional in passing it on. They are passing it on even to their children who are going into the nursing and medical field, which I think is really powerful. So I met a few of them who were like, my daughter is becoming a nurse, but she also grew up with this. So she's going to be really good in bringing these two things together. And they will say, okay, my son is a medical scientist and he also knows about this. So there's also that. And I think this is also letting me talk about how they also consult for the Western medical personnel, sometimes in secret. So they will say, do you know we also get referrals from the hospitals? We get referrals from doctors who know what we are able to do. So either this doctor is connected to them, maybe by, family relation or community, and know that this person can do this. So are you willing to go to this person? So there's that also, the secret and, acknowledgement of the power that is in indigenous midwifery that is not openly accepted. So I thought that was also like something really powerful.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I think this is excellent, and this is as far as I can take my questions. Let me hand over to Mercy, and I think there must be a lot of people who want to ask questions.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Mokani,
Yeah,
thank you,
thank you
Mercy.
so much. And I have several comments, and all of them they're just fascinated, and they're congratulating you for the brilliant presentation and the work that you're like. Yeah, I think we need to hear more of this kind of presentations. And then I also have Yasmina. She has raised her hand. Yasmina, if you can unmute yourself and ask a question or comment.
Yes, thank you very much for this presentation. I really appreciate most of the things you said. I really like the fact that you emphasize on the fact that we tend to want to teach to African people who are knowledgeable about certain stuff. Like we all want to learn architecture from a Western perspective when we have different realities. We also want to work with those women in birth giving sector, but we want to train them as if they don't know what they are doing, and they have been doing that for so long, but we still think that we have stuff to teach them instead of being humble and learning from them. And also, I really like the fact that you also talk about the birth giving position, because I've also learned that what you said, like we used to have different type of position, but now they ask us to like be on our back to make it easier for the people who are doing the job. And it's not good for women, but it's good for them. And this might be maybe problematic, but that's why I think that we should leave women do women job. Like as as women, we more understand our challenges. Like I feel like men, they will not really know because they don't go through that. But as women, we know. Even like going to the gynecologist. Like when I was young, they told me that, oh, when you will start going, go to men because they are more gentle. But when I start going, I realized that whenever I was saying something, the doctor was sometimes lost, and I was the one who was teaching him and telling, oh, maybe this is why. This is because I know better my body. But when I start going to women, I didn't need to do anything to say anything because she also go through like period and all, so she knows, right? So I think it's also really important to like value more women knowledge in those kind of fields because we know, because we are also like going through all those stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine. That was well thought. Yeah. And then we have Oyorenke Oyowumi. Yeah. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. It's afternoon here, sorry. I am so proud of you, Shino. I'm just gushing like a woman who just gave birth. And I just gave birth to you. I'm claiming you.
Thank you.
My daughter, as you know, you are my academic daughter in more ways than one. Thank you for such an excellent presentation. What this brings to my mind, and it's not just today, has to do with generational transfers, generational change. Because I see people like you and Ogechukwu and a whole new generation of African women researchers taking the discourse, taking research on questions of gender, motherhood to another level. And I keep thinking that when I started out 35, 40 years ago, there's no way we could have really done the kind of research that you guys are doing. And so in certain ways, I'm happy to say some of the research that we have done opened the way for you to be able to get into the society, into the community, and bring out wonderful nuggets of knowledge that we need in order to transform our societies. And boy, we need to transform that terrible situation in Nigeria in which maternal mortality rate is so high. But this is a wonderful way of approaching it. But what it also shows is the degree to which our societies are so colonial still. And I'm saying that because decolonial doesn't capture it. How is it that we can still talk about practices of birthing, motherhood, and have to divide it between the indigenous and the modern, whereas we are still the same people? How do we bring those things together seamlessly so that we will use all our knowledge to transform society? I think that's one of the wonderful things, your research and the kinds of research I'm seeing. Those are the things that you are doing and doing very well. I wondered how your work intersects with that of Ogechukwu, for example, whose book just came out. I remember that during the Lagos Studies meeting, I wasn't able to attend your panels, but I know you were in the same panel together. So I'm interested in how your work comes together. And then at the Yoruba level, and I'll stop talking. I love the fact that you're using Yoruba terms, as I have advocated in my work. And I know the term agbebi. I wonder, have you tried to break it down? Is it agba ebi, abi agba ibi? Because in Yoruba, ibi is the placenta. So please enlighten us further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Oyewumi. And sure, we are grateful for the foundation that you laid. And we're grateful to be leaning on your shoulders and just like picking it up, picking the gauntlet to where you left it for us. So thank you so much for doing all the work that we can now refer to. Thank you. And Agba Ebi is what I've been translating into. And Tongba Ebi, like AIDS, child delivery, AIDS, child. But I really love how you're also thinking about Agba Ibi Omo, because they actually deliver both the fetus and the placenta, because without the delivery of the placenta, a birthing is not complete. So he could actually be bored and Agba Ibi, because Ibi also needs to be delivered for a B to actually be complete. So I would really think about that and also do a little bit more analysis of that terminology in my work. So that's like noted. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Ogechukwu, I really love her work. So Ogechukwu is doing because she's in history. So I love that she's doing the historical research. And I just got a book. I'm teaching reproductive justice, assigning some of the chapters. I'm bringing her to TCU in the spring, and I'm going to write a review of her book. So we're working together that much. Yeah, so I love that I love that, she finished the birth politics, and I can cite a lot to really ground my work in the historical research. So this is how I see how our work connects. So because she's in history, she's doing the historical research, and would say, okay, in 18th century, 17th century, so I can use all of those historical perspectives to ground my findings in these contemporary times. So I'm thinking about using it to make the connection between the historical and the contemporary. So while I'm focusing on the contemporary and all the ways that we could decolonize, she gives that strong historical foundation and background. So that's how our work connects. And I love that we're really in conversation, working together, chairing panels and all that. So yeah, I'm happy. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I know there was...
One more comment.
Okay, ma'am.
Quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the light of Professor Marconi's question about whether there are cultural fertilization. There's a young woman, which shows I'm old. Everybody is young now these days. I can't just say woman. Another of my many daughters, she's in Ouidah, in the Republic of Benin.
Okay.
And about 2 Christmases ago, I went to attend what she calls a healing and birthing retreat in Ouidah. And she does it regularly. Her name is Mojiyai. And at this birthing retreat, I stayed there for a week. I wasn't having new babies. I've had 3. But many of the people who come to her retreat are African Americans. She also had lived in the US. And during the birthing retreat, we went to see local birth attendants that she works with. So this is really interesting. And the cross-fertilization across the diaspora Africa is so important. And I think that we need to continue that kind of cooperation and take it to the next level and impact on policy and transformation. Finally, on a personal level, I had a second child as a cesarean section. My first child wasn't. My second was born in the US as a cesarean section. So when I was going to have a third child, everybody told me that the third child had to be cesarean, and I wasn't going to accept that. I was, at that time, in Santa Barbara, teaching in Santa Barbara, and I was going to have a baby, and I didn't want another cesarean. But I was able to find an Indian doctor, a doctor from South Asia. And the reason I chose her was the way she responded to my conversation. I said, you know what? These people are scalpel happy in the US. They always want to do cesareans, and I don't want a cesarean birth. And she said, no, you don't have to. And guess what? My son was born in Santa Barbara, and he was not a cesarean section, even despite the fact that my first son was a cesarean section. So this is ongoing conversation and practices, and there's a lot to learn from even our personal experiences. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I would just really love to say a little bit more about, that transfer of knowledge and how people of African descent and are carrying this on beyond the shores of Africa. So Suni Franklin, I saw your chat. I'm unable to respond, but I just wanted to know that I see your chat and I see you. So Suni Franklin has this WhatsApp group that brings Black midwives together, doulas, birth workers who are reclaiming this African indigenous perspective. And it's really big and it's vibrant. It's hard for me to even catch up on everything that is being posted, but it's such a strong community. And I'm speaking with some of them. I'm speaking with Mama Saran. I've spoken with Shakona Eli. I've spoken with Jumoke Dauda, who are all part of that community of African diaspora, people of African descent, reclaiming this in North America. So it is really powerful. And we remember that American gynecology was built not only on the backs of using Black women, Black enslaved women for experiment, but was also built on their knowledge, the birthing knowledge that they brought from the continent when they were enslaved. And they were using that to help the Black community, not only the Black community, but also helping the white women deliver their babies safely. And this is how, American gynecology was built on their knowledge. The person Sims, who is regarded as the father of American gynecologists, had Black women working with him that they weren't given credit for everything that he learned, that was built on their back. And we know that granny midwives were so vibrant, helping the American community birth until the medicalization of childbirth that's pushed them away. And now the medical training school and then the medical certification, and now they're not recognized. It's the same process of the colonial disruption on the continent, where you're all dying, your ways of birthing is leading you all to death, and we have this better way, this new way. The new way hasn't helped us so far. It's double jeopardy, what I call double palaver for birthing people. They say go to the hospital. The hospitals are not available. There are not enough doctors. There are no funds. Then they say don't go to the Agbebi. And then they are just in the middle dangling. What do you want them to do? So we need a policy that is connected to our lived realities in Nigeria, in Africa, and just like everywhere that we have birthing people. So I just wanted to really reiterate that this is a powerful force that is really in the US, in Nigeria, and I would love to see it grow more, and I would love to see birthwork become more acceptable to the critical, powerful, potent, valid bodies of knowledge of the Africans. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I want to just comment back on the first comment. I can't remember, Yasima, who was asking, talking about how it's women's work. We should get it back to women. So that's like a conversation where I see in the US, it's seen as women's work, the granny midwives work. But I wonder if we only had granny midwives because all the men, the enslaved men, had to work on the plantation. And then the women, would have to like birth and do some other thing. And then I also understand that, when we think about patriarchy in the US and male hijack of the birthing world, we have to think about how that might not be the reality of where we've always had men and women being part of this work, and how that might be something, different. So we can talk about commonalities based on the social, political, medical system, but we can also talk about how there are some differences that we need to pay attention to, especially when we think about whether birth work should be women's work or not. So I just wanted to make that final note. And for the people asking in the chat for Ogechukwu Williams' book, it is titled, I'll put it in chat also, Birth Politics, Colonial Power, Medical Pluralism, and Maternity in Nigeria. And the author is Ogechukwu Williams. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that engagement. And I see that you're also very keen to see, because I was just about to start reading the comments for you. So yeah, if you are anyone who wants to have any comments or any question, and I can see here people have already put on the chat about the website on retreat, as well as the book by Ogwechukwu Ezekiel Williams. So feel free to raise your hand and ask any question. Yes, Professor Orenrique, if you want to ask, I can see that you have still raised your hand.
Yes, I couldn't find my the raised hands, so that's why I'm raising it.
Okay.
So I don't want to hog the space. So can I go forward? I still had something to say.
Yes, you can go ahead before we let another person who has also raised her hand. Yes.
I'm sorry, I have to pat my own back. Because in certain ways, your work just validates the work I've done for decades. I have argued that in Yoruba society, there was nothing called gender until recently. And I don't know what proves it more than the fact that midwifery was not, midwifing was not gender specific. So I'm happy to see that. And that's why I called my book, What Gender is Motherhood? Because the whole tenor and argument of the book is that in Yoruba society, motherhood was not gendered. Not in the sense that male anatomy, men were birthing babies directly, but that the experience was seen as a human experience. So you can imagine, in my initial engagement with feminism and all that gender for 30, 40 years, it was like, what's this? And I had to bring the Yoruba situation, the Yoruba experience, into the center of feminist discourse. And it was almost as if, are you making this up? Are you out of your mind? I remember somebody once telling me that if the Yorubas did not do gender, how did they have babies? I laughed. I said, oh, we go to Kenya and have the Kikuyus help us, or something like that. So I'm glad the work you're doing is actually interrogating and explicating this thing called gender, the complexities of it, and how to understand it. Because the way it had come to us from the West just doesn't capture much of what was going on in Africa, and indeed what is still going on in Africa. I think this is so important. This is so important. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. And also, I think we have a few men, trans women who are also getting trained as doulas, who are also interested in this birth work in the US. So that's also, we're beginning to realize that it is actually a communal work, a work that sees us together as just humans. And that there's this a lot of difference when you think about male in birth work in the Western medical space, and then when you think about it in the indigenous Yoruba times, which is so when I started presenting this, what people would say, are the men in there for the money? Is it a new thing? It was hard for people to wrap their head around it, that they are not taking it over, they're not getting into it for money, they are not just getting it. It has always been like that birthing was not like a job for men or women. It was something that was within the community that is human, and that the men were also into it. So I think that that's like really a good note, a good thing to really point on. And I'm using Abiyamo, which I also got from your book. It's somewhere on my table, like what motherhood is gender, for the birthers. And that word in itself, it's not gendered. It's not thinking about motherhood in terms of a woman who gives birth. It's like the community raising that child. It could be the mother, the father, and also, and then, but that's the word that I'm using to describe the birthers. So whereas here in the US, thinking about my connection in the US Black community, and then the birth and reproductive justice framework, we were just catching up with, oh, we shouldn't be saying, maybe pregnant women and all that. We're like, okay, birthing persons, birthers and all that. We are catching up in trying to use more gender inclusive terminology, which has always been there for us in the Yoruba, for instance, as Abiyamo, which is not, has never been gendered. So I'm grateful for that book also. So that one is really something that I'm always drawing from. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And then we also have Sumi Franklin. If you can go ahead and unmute yourself and give us a question or comment. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I don't even know where to start, honestly. I'll first say thank you so much, Esther, for this powerful conversation, for the work you are doing. Thank you, everyone. I'm imagining that many of us here on this call have a similar vision. I do see that, like you said, Professor Oyewumi, that previously when you first got into academics, it will be impossible to have these conversations. It will be impossible to, even the book you wrote, right? I'm sure it could not exist in the same way it does today, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And I want to just acknowledge that first. You have so many points have been made since I first felt inspired to share something that honestly, I'm derailed now in what I was originally going to say, but on all, something that I would like to just highlight and just bring light to and emphasize is the importance, and you end up doing it, of understanding each other, like the global history by those who are the most impacted by the maternal health crisis, which are Black people, Black women, Black birthing people, Indigenous people all around the world. The poorest, the most, least educated are the most impacted. And it's not lost on me that we have similar histories. Like over and over and over and over again, I see this. It could be talking about the people who are the most impacted by the maternal health crisis in India. And then I'm like, wow, it's very interesting that they too have, it's the same pattern. It's like a formula that was used. And I think right now what I mostly run into is that people are very, very, when they learn this, you get very charged up. It's very inspiring. You get very angry. You might want to mobilize. I want to do something about this. It's not right. And oftentimes the question is, well, how do we fix this huge, it's like a big monster, like a Goliath. Like, how do we defeat this maternal health crisis? Particularly the Black maternal health crisis? And the answer is very, very simple, the antidote. And it lies in the wisdom, the hands, the wombs, the minds of the traditional midwife, the indigenous midwifery practices. And that's why mothering wasn't gendered, because they understood that this is a human experience. We're all impacted. We all must, experience birth. So therefore, we all must be devoted to it being safe and it being uplifted. This is why we have a rest period in all cultures for the mothers, not because, oh, I want her to be a queen, because on a human level, this is the least that is needed in order for the body, the mind, the spirit to recuperate from such a process. And it's not just for her, even the attendants, why they have so many attendants. We all are integrating this person into our society, our culture, our world. And we know if we pour in, it's like a farmer. The more we give nutrients and light and water, it's going to bring a big harvest for all of us to reap from. So the premise of my work is the integration of traditional midwifery practices, as I know you know some of, Esther. And with that, I also like to share that, just to highlight, also patting myself in the back too, I'm taking professors lead, that I just started the Black Midwives Fellowship. And everything that we're talking about is literally the reason why I'm starting it. There's not a lot of space to pour into midwifery, and especially traditional midwives are ostracized. We have to go underground, we're criminalized, and I made the intentional political and spiritual and cultural ancestral decision to drop out.
I think she got disconnected, yeah, because of a network problem. But we thank her for a very, very nice summary of what she does, and I think this one complements so much with what you do. I think there's a question for you here on the chat from Monica. She's asking, did the women visit at the onset of labor or while in their third trimester?
Oh, the women go there when they know they're pregnant, and some even go there to prepare for pregnancy, right? Fertility treatments and all that. So it's an all-encompassing maternal health service that they give to the women. So they don't only go there to give birth. So they go there to get, treated for any childbirth, pregnancy related. They go there for their antenatal or prenatal, as the case may be. So some will go there weekly in their third trimester, or bi-weekly or monthly when it's still early. And they usually have their own gathering, just gathering of pregnant women coming together and creating that community, also singing together and then going into consult. So yeah. That's how they do it. So they do actually take care of the pregnancy up till the labor and delivery.
Yes, okay, thank you for that. And I guess people were also asking about how they can get the books. And I think Professor Oyerinke Oyume has already shared the name of the book and where it can be purchased. Yes. For anyone who wants to comment or have final thoughts, because before we head on to an after part session. Yeah, so someone is also asking where she can get the book in Nigeria. So Professor Oyomi.
Nigeria. I don't know that you can, but if you are able to, there's a bookstore called Jazz Hole in Lagos. He used to carry my books, but I don't know about right now. So sorry, I can't do better than that.
Okay, she said thank you. And then there's also
I have another thing. You can send me an email and you can get some other version of a copy. Okay?
Okay, I think
Can I put my email?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and then I think I would like to read the final comment. I have a comment from Patience Okiere. So she's saying thank you for the wonderful presentation. I would also like to emphasize that in Ghana, it's not common to see men as midwives. In fact, they are practically non-existent. I grew up in what I would describe as a village town, and I recall that my younger brother was circumcised by a traditional circumciser, locally known as a wanzam. The process went smoothly without any complication. In contrast, my elder sister nearly lost her son when she chose to have him circumcised in the hospital. These experiences highlight that traditional midwives and practitioners did and still do remarkable work. Their relevance should not be dismissed or erased as if they do not count. In fact, they need to be reinstated. I think this one is echoing to what you have been discussing, yeah, but from another perspective. Yes. And then we also have Nana Anna. She says, this conversation has me asking myself, why did I never consider traditional birth attendants or wanzams for my boy's circumcision? They never crossed my mind, never even appeared as an option. Now I find myself wondering why not? Was it because of how I was socialized? What I was taught to value as modern or safe, quote unquote, or perhaps what I unconsciously dismissed as outdated. Thank you for provoking me to question the many things we have accepted as normal without pause. It makes me realize how powerful history, culture, and colonial legacy shape our choices, often without us even noticing. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Can I just jump in, Mercy?
Yes.
If there is anybody on this platform who would like to present or talk about their work in future relating to some of the topics that we're raising, just get in touch with Mercy or get in touch with Oski and Phoebe, and we'll be able to schedule a time for you to come and talk.
Yes, so uh, thank you so much, Professor Macaulay, for that. So it's 10:34, and according to a schedule, we should be stopping the moderated version. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording before we begin an after party. Uh, Yes, and before that, I'd like to mention about our next speaker. So our next speaker is Trang Nguyen from University of Melbourne, and the topic is going to be internal linguistic colonialism in education for ethnically minoritized students in Vietnam. So the session is gonna happen next time, same place, from wherever you are. So I'm gonna stop the recording.